Now, the conflict in Israel continues as we speak tonight. And I spoke a short while ago with Melanie Phillips. She's a columnist for the Times, the London Times, who's based in Jerusalem. Melanie Phillips, I'm so glad you've been able to join us. Are you safe where you are?
Not really. I mean, I am in Jerusalem, which is possibly one of the most dangerous places on earth generally, and is certainly dangerous now. On Monday night, I was working away in my office when an air raid siren went off, and a couple of, I think it's 90 seconds later, there were the unmistakable crumps of rockets coming from the Hamas in Gaza, being fired in the direction of Jerusalem, which landed somewhere near Jerusalem. And since then, it's been, a steady barrage, mainly towards central Israel and the coastal plain. But of course, Jerusalem's not safe. And what's happening here is not just the rocket barrage from Gaza, something like 1,500 or more than 1,000 rockets overnight last night. Which is quite unprecedented and extraordinary towards Israel. But what's going on in Jerusalem and in other cities with mixed Jewish and Arab populations is that the Israeli Arabs, for the first time, are taking part in this war against Israel, war against the Jews. And there are terrible scenes in the city of Lod, which has a large Muslim Arab population. There have been tremendous amounts of attacks overnight on Israeli Jewish targets, 3 synagogues, I think, firebombed, a number of cars set alight, windows in shop windows smashed, people too frightened to get into the bomb shelters because they are being attacked, attempts at lynchings, dragging Israeli motorists out of their cars. And so this is unprecedented, and it makes the situation in Israel exceptionally dangerous, not just from the rockets coming from Gaza, but from an uprising inside as well.
Yes, it is quite extraordinary, quite frightening. I think it's worse than anything I've seen for a long, long time. What actually started this? Now, I heard one reporter claim, incorrectly I believe, like so much reporting on Israel, that it all started because a Jewish or an Israeli court wants to take the houses of 4 Palestinian families in East Jerusalem, take those houses off them and give them to Jews. What's the truth behind this allegation?
Every part of this narrative is a complete lie, and it's a lie that's being fed to Western media audiences in Britain, in America, in Australia, and elsewhere. On the specific claim about these houses in Sheikh Jarrah, this neighborhood in Jerusalem, the situation is this. These Palestinian Arab residents are the tenants of an Israeli Jewish organization which owns the properties. The predecessor tenants, Arab tenants, have also been the tenants of an Israeli Jewish organization because the properties in question have been in Jewish legal ownership really since the middle of the 19th century, with one big exception, which was the period between 1948 and 1967, when Jordan illegally occupied these territories and illegally sequestered the land, expelled all the Jewish inhabitants, expelled the Jewish residents of these houses, and sequestered the territory, sequestered the properties. Subsequently, when Jerusalem was reunified by the Israelis, Jews returned to ownership, legal, rightful ownership of their properties. They still had Arab tenants. The Arab tenants agreed in writing that the Jews were entitled to own these properties. What's produced this threatened eviction of these tenants is that they are refusing to pay their rent and instead are illegally expanding their properties. In other words, it's a rent dispute between landlord and tenant. The idea that this caused this conflagration is ludicrous. What the media have failed to report is that this tension, this violence, is the result of an incitement which has been going on for weeks. At the beginning of Ramadan, there was the beginning of incitement by the Palestinian Authority, by Hamas, calling Palestinian Arabs to holy war, as a result of which there were attacks on Jews in Jerusalem, in the streets. requiring hospitalization, attacks in the streets, attacks on the light railway. There were attempts to arrest them. There were then violent disturbances by the Arabs. And what then happened as Ramadan proceeded was that the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the supposedly holy place for Muslims, was turned into a theatre of war. Weapons were stockpiled there, rocks, petrol bombs, and they began to be thrown down from the Al-Aqsa compound onto Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall just below, onto the police. Eventually, the Israeli police went in, and there were battles in the mosque, unprecedented. I mean, this is a place which Israel considers so incendiary. It forbids Jews from going there, and it forbids Jews from praying there. It forbids Jews from going there from time to time, and it always forbids Jews from praying there. It's Jews who are prevented from having their religious rights at that place. But they went in, the Israeli police went in, because the place was being used as a site of attempted murder. Subsequently, the incitement went on. You had the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah grouping, whose head is Mahmoud Abbas, who the West insists on regarding as a man of peace and a potential statesman in waiting, inciting Palestinian Muslims to holy war. And as I think you may yourself have referred to, this extraordinary piece broadcast by the senior Hamas operative, saying explicitly, cut the throats of the Jews, and this is a holy war against what he called Jews and polytheists, which I believe is a kind of euphemism for Christians. So that's what we're in here. We're in an Islamic holy war incited by Mahmoud Abbas and the Hamas, and being sanitized, misrepresented quite wickedly by the Western media to make, once again, Israel, which is the victim of this holy war, seem the aggressor, and the aggressor seem the victim.
I've been appalled by the media reporting, but honestly, Melanie, as you well know, this is not new. This happens every time there's a conflict involving Israel. I can't quite understand it. I don't know whether it's victim politics, whether it's exaggerated anti-racism turned into anti-Jewish feeling. I don't know what it is. But you've also written that the United States and the European Union are conniving here at murderous violence against Israeli Jews. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, two things by that, principally. First of all, the European Union and before President Trump's administration were funding Palestinian Arab terror against Israel and Israeli Jews, in that they were giving the Palestinians money. And on the basis this was for educational purposes. And the money was being used either directly or indirectly to produce an absolutely unstoppable torrent of both anti-Israel and anti-Jewish hatred. I mean, Palestinian children, now adults and their children, are taught basically from the cradle to hate Jews, and not just to hate Jews, but not just to hate Israel. They're taught, that the whole of Israel should be theirs, and they're taught that their highest aspiration is to fight Israelis and conquer cities like Haifa and so on and so forth, Jaffa. But they're also taught to hate Jews very explicitly, using Nazi-type imagery of the most grotesque kind. Now, this is never, ever reported in the Western media, but this is where Western money is going to. Now, President Trump put a stop to that, but the Biden administration has restored the money. The Biden administration has basically signaled that it's going to, that it wants to re-empower Iran. It wants to rejoin the nuclear deal, which means that it will once again be helping funnel billions of dollars into Iranian coffers to enable it to pursue its nefarious activities. Now, and it's also withdrawn love from Saudi Arabia. Now, all this has given a signal to the Palestinians that they can get away with anything.
It has. I think they're playing Biden. They're playing around while they think there's a little power vacuum there that they won't be jumped on. They're testing him. and Israel's paying the price. Melanie Phillips, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.